Welcome to part 2 of how to annoy your best employees. Now, if you watched in the last video, I talked about the first 4 kinds of folks that you have on your team. And today I want to talk about optimizers and orchestrators, relators, and visionaries. As managers, when you lead your people, it's important to understand that each one is different. And I'm not saying that all optimizers are identical, all orchestrators are identical, but I'm saying that the fact that you have or potentially have an optimizer, an orchestrator, relator, or visionary on your team means you ought to think about how you're managing each one. Because if you do it wrong, it's like putting pebbles in the shoes of your best folks. It won't affect you on day 1, maybe not on day 2, but after a month of living with pebbles in your shoes, that friction, that constant irritation ultimately gets to the point where people bounce. So as a leader, what does it mean if you have an optimizer on your team? Those are the folks that love to make things better. Process improvement. They like to think about how to make things, a little more efficient, a little better every day. So if you don't recognize that they're doing that, already you're going to have a problem, because that's what they live for, is that recognition that says, hey, good job. I see that you made things 3% better. If you're one of those folks who's constantly looking for 10, 20, 30% increases, you're going to ignore that 3%. And that's not good. The other thing is, what happens when they come to you with suggestions for how to make things better? And if you're like, yeah, that's not a big deal, and you wave it off, eventually you're going to watch that person walk off. What about orchestrators? Well, those are the folks that like to pull people together to make something happen. They're the ones that like to drive collaboration. So if you don't bring them in to think about, plan, or lead your best teams on your best projects, they're going to be left wondering, do you just not trust me, or do you not recognize my talent? If you don't think about them when, if you're kind of aggregating all the strategic thinking to just your role, you're missing out on leveraging your orchestrators. If you're not asking them for opinions, or what's worse is if you're asking them for opinions and then you don't do anything with it. Lastly, with orchestrators, just don't fall in the trap of micromanaging them, because that's going to cause you a lot of trouble and pain. Now, let's talk about relators, right? Putting them in anything where they have no interaction with people, right? Individual contributor, but not just individual contributor roles, but also solitary roles. That's going to kill them, right? So you don't want to take a relator and be like, here, go analyze this data in a spreadsheet for the next 2 months. We'll see you later. They're not going to get it done, and they're going to be really frustrated about it. Relators also, they bristle at highly competitive, pitting one person against another environments. So don't do that, right? I worked in a company once where from on high, they were like, hey, we're going to have this competition and we're going to put up the leaderboard and everybody competes. And there are several people who are like, this is awesome. Relators just weren't that. Relators were like, this doesn't feel like we're going to grow as a team, right? So you want to make sure you don't put them on solo projects. You want to make sure that you don't create highly competitive person versus person dynamics, because they're going to feel frustrated. Also, they're the best people to go to when you're asking about what's the interpersonal dynamic. But if you never ask for their opinion, right, eventually they're going to be like, hey, I have this talent and nobody's using it. So watch out for that. And lastly, visionaries, right? If you don't give them an outlet for creativity or innovative thinking, that's going to be a challenge. If you take every one of their ideas when they suggest it, they're like, hey, what about this? And you're like, nah, we don't need that, or that's not practical, or let's go tried and true. Anytime you're playing the card, status quo is better than potentially making a change that could lift us up, they're going to feel frustrated. So those are the 4 other, we looked at the first 4 in the last video, those are the 4 other dimensions. And you may wonder, how do I figure out what my people are? And that's why we created motivationcode.com, so that you could get each person an assessment. They'll love it. It's fantastic. But then you can start saying, hey, let me take a look at this. For years, I used other assessments. And every time I hired someone, I would pay for their assessment and have them go and then get me the report so I could better understand how to maximize the benefit of all the different talents that each person was bringing on the team.